Hey guys, welcome to our brand new How to Paint series. My name's Fletcher and I am the studio artist for Tabletop Tactics. In today's show, we're painting something big. If you like your war engine served with tentacle arms and a side of chaotic magic, this is the video for you as we show you how to paint the new Chaos Knight Abominant. We'll be learning a multitude of different techniques from grimdark weathering to using the airbrush more creatively. You'll also learn how to paint very small birds. If you're looking to up your brush skills with me, we have a ton more painting content on the way. Be sure to check out tabletoptactics.tv and sign up on demand for those shows and more. Are you ready? It's time for the war paint. So guys, jumping straight into it, the first step after building the knight is obviously priming it. Now I've built it in sub-assemblies for ease of painting later on, and I've primed the skeleton and accessories in Chaos Black primer and all the armor panels in Halford's Grey primer, as will be the perfect foundation for the bone armor color we're going to put on. Now the first color I'm using is Vallejo Gunmetal Air, and I'm shooting it through the airbrush with just a dash of thinner, running it about 25 psi. Once it's all loaded up, shoot it through the airbrush and give it the skeleton a nice solid covering, and the accessories that are in sub-assemblies that also need to be covered in metal. And as you can see, it's a beautiful colour already. The next step, we're going to take some Steel Legion Drab and we're going to prepare it on our palette and start blocking in the areas on the skeleton that need to be in copper. Now I'm doing it with a brown first, as it will be easier for the subsequent copper colour to go over. So the copper colour we're going to choose is Hashnut Copper by Games Workshop. A really nice cover, but not much. It doesn't have great coverage to go on top of just this metal on its own. So that's the reason why we put the Steel Legion Drab down first. And as you can see, it's all blocked in really nicely there. Next, I'm going to use Decayed Metal by Scale 75 just to block in the coils of this gun. Next, I'm using Vallejo Black, 950 Black, and I'm going to block in all the pipes and the coils and stuff around the knight. So we're going to wash the skeleton and accessories with a combination of Agrax Earthshade and Nuln Oil. So I'm just dunking them into this little pot I have. It's just a primer lid, and I'm going to use a large dry brush to liberally cover all the knight. And I'm doing it in sections here, as I want the application of this wash to be nice and clean. So I'm just going to splosh on a layer in a section and then wipe it off with a clean brush. I'm doing this section by section as the paint will obviously dry too fast for me to do this if I did all the knight in one go. As you can see, I am just scrubbing all the paint off the surface, and it gives a nice clean look, as you can see at this finished dried result. Next, we're moving on to the armor panels. So the first color we're going to put down is Zandri Dust, which is a good foundation for our lighter bone color. And I thinned it out through the airbrush with a bit of thinner, and I'm shooting about 25 psi through my airbrush, doing it in multiple thin layers just to get a nice solid coverage. Don't forget to block in the bits on the skeleton by brush with this colour. And yeah, next we're moving on to Ushabti Bone, and we're going to run it through the airbrush in the same way, but we're kind of shooting at the centre of the armour panels. We're leaving a bit of that Zandri Dust around the outside just to get kind of early start on this volumetric highlight. So we're aiming to cover most of the armour panels, but yeah, we're leaving some of those shadows behind. For the armour panels around the feet that we can't airbrush, because obviously the overspray will go on the metal, I'm just going to do a simple volumetric highlight of the Ushabti Bone on top of the Zandri Dust. Next, I'm going to add some Vallejo Silver Grey into my Ushabti Bone and focus it again more in the centre of the armour panels, so we're leaving some of the Ushabti Bone behind. And this way we're going to build up some simple but really effective looking volumetric highlights. After that bone colour is all done, we're going to start masking off the areas to prepare for the red armour panels. So I'm just using some hobby masking tape. Use as many pieces as necessary to go up to the line where you need to, and it'll be ready for masking. So I'm going to use a mix of Khorne Red and Vallejo Black at about a 90-10 mix. We want it mostly to be Khorne Red. And I'm going to carefully just fill in those red armour panels with this mixture. Go slowly with this and let each layer dry before applying the next, as we don't want any bleed under the tape. So yeah, I'm just going to highlight that with pure Khorne Red for the airbrush at the second stage. And as you can see, it gives a really nice result at the end. Peeling off that masking tape is one of the best parts about using an airbrush, I think. And yeah, I've just blocked in parts of the armour around the night with a paintbrush using this colour as well. Next, I'm going to add some stripes using Fire Dragon Bright and some masking tape again. And I'm just going to pick what I fancy around the armour and yeah, just block it out with masking tape again. Same approach, we're just going to build it up with thin layers of paint and make sure it's not too wet as well for the airbrush. We don't want it to be fairly dry. And yeah, this is the result of the orange. Next, I'm going to cover the entirety of all the sub-assemblies with gloss varnish to prepare for the following stages of transfers. I'm using a mixture of Chaos Knight transfers and also Imperial Knight transfers. I'll show you why later on. And yeah, the first job is obviously cutting out the transfer with your hobby knife and then dunking it in water. I've got these really cool tweezers that you don't need to put pressure on all the time, and you can just leave it there for 30 seconds, take it out and set it on your paper towel to dry. I'm using microset to prepare the area where you want the transfer, as it will stick to it nice and easy and hold there. And then yeah, just transfer the transfer onto that panel with your paintbrush and maneuver it where you need it to be. After that's set for about 5 minutes, the next step is using some microsol to go on top of that transfer. Now this product is great as it will kind of melt the plastic backing and it'll help it adhere to the surface. And that's all the armour panels with all the transfers done. Next, I'm going to use some gloss varnish to go over those transfers to firstly add a layer of protection, but also to help the backing to blend in with the panel. And then once that's dried, I'm going to use some matte varnish to give it that nice finish that we want, and also help for our acrylics to stick to later on. Now after that, I'm going to use a combination of colours to sponge chip the armour. So for the red bits, I'm going to use some Chaos Black and Khorne Red. For the bone armour, I'm going to use a mix of Ushabti Bone and Silver Grey, and I'm going to chip the orange bits with our Fire Dragon Bright. I'm just using some hobby sponge that I'm going to kind of tear off to make it irregular and use our tweezers to kind of stick it into our colour and then apply it onto the model. As you can see, I am choosing the colour where appropriate. So for the red here, I'm going to chip the transfers with our original red colour. And so we get this nice weathered look across the armour on our transfers. I'm also going to switch the brush to add scratches across the armour as well. Now for the overspray on the orange, I'm going to cleverly get rid of that via the use of chipping, as you can see with the sponge. Making it nice and irregular and getting rid of our orange overspray that bled through a bit with the airbrush masking. I'm also again going to use the brush to get more specific areas I want, so around the edges where the orange is. And yeah, this is the weathering. Next step, I'm going to use some Flesh Wash by Army Painter. I'm going to apply it across the whole armour to give it some definition. So I've got 2 cups here, and one I'm going to fill with Flow Improver, just pure Flow Improver, and the other I'm going to use a mixture of Flow Improver and Flesh Wash, as I want it to be thinned out as well. I'm also going to use this mixing medium, as it will float a bit nicely across the model. So with the pot of the wash in, I'm going to mix that up nicely and start applying it to the model. That is the kind of consistency you want there. As you can see, it's instantly defining around the outside of the trim and giving the armour a bit more texture across the panel as well. The reason why we have the other pot is so we can use that pure Flow Improver to wipe off any puddles, any pooling, as you can see. To summarise, we're using the Flesh Wash mixture to go on the armour first, and then using the pure Flow Improver to wipe off the remnants on the flat areas. And as you can see, this is the finished result, and yeah, it instantly gives and adds definition. Don't forget to apply it onto the areas of bone armour that we blocked in on the skeleton. Next step, I'm going to use some Gunmetal Air, and I'm going to block it in around the armour panels where it's needed. I'm mixing it with a bit of Steel Legion Drab as well, to give it a bit of, give the colour a bit of brown and also mute it down a bit. And this is probably the step that will take the longest, but it is well worth it. And we're going to block in all of the armour trim around the model. Some areas might need 2 coats for a strong coverage, but yeah, make sure those areas are dry before going back over. And as you can see, this is the result. Next, I'm using some pure Gunmetal Air to block in other bits, other accessories around the armour, like the chains and pipes. This paint is really good for doing this, as it is pre-thinned for airbrush. It's really nice for just blocking with the brush, as you don't need to thin it with any water. I've also gone around the areas of armour like the pipes and blocked it in with Hashnut Copper as well, just to add a bit of variety. Again, I'm going to apply a bit of wash over the armour, so I'm using just Agrax Earthshade thinned out with a bit of airbrush thinner, as I don't want the brown colour to be too strong. The other pot is full of thinner, again, just for wicking away any pooling. So like before, I am spreading the wash all across the armour trim, make sure I'm getting it in the recesses as well, and I'm using the pure thinner in the other pot to remove the excess puddles. And this is the finished result after the wash is dried. Next, I'm using some Steel Legion Drab again. mixing it with 950 Black. With this mixture, I'm going to start giving the bone armour some chipping. I'm using the sponge again as it is nice and easy, and also I will switch to the brush again to add some scratches as well. Just enhancing a bit of the chips just to make it a bit regular with the paintbrush. And as said, doing these scratches. Next, I'm using some Vallejo Silver Grey, and I'm just going to add this underneath the scratches so they look a bit more 3D and a bit more realistic. Next, I'm using some Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to use this to emulate some streaking on the armour where coming out of the holes of the armour. Next, I'm using a mixture of Khorne Red and Ushabti Bone to do a similar thing on the red armour panels. Going underneath the chipping to give it a 3D effect, and also edge highlighting the bits around the armour in this colour as well, just to make them stand out, give them a bit more detail. Next, I'm using a mixture of Trollslayer Orange and Skrag Brown by Games Workshop, and I'm mixing them together, and I'm adding a lot of water as this is going to be rust. That's going to be all around the trim of the armour and also the metal skeleton. There isn't really a rule to this. It's a lot of fun doing this step actually, and we're just going to apply it just randomly over the trim. And I'm often kind of washing my brush with water and then feathering it out around the armour so it's not too blocky as well. Don't forget to go around the exoskeleton of the knight with this colour too. Here I'm just using a bit of streaking on metal trim just to add a bit of interest, and I'm just feathering it out, adding water to the brush as I go. And this is the finished result, and it's instantly added a lot of interest to our armour. Here it is across all the skeleton. Next, I'm using some Vallejo Silver, and I'm just going to edge highlight all of the trim. Using the side of the brush at a 45-degree angle, I'm going to just rub the brush across the edges, almost like dry brushing in a way, and it's just going to make the details really stand out. Here it is, all edge highlighted. The next thing we're going to do is highlight all the rubber coils and pipes around the armour. And the first colour I'm going to use is Dark Reaper by Games Workshop. We're doing this first highlight fairly large to fit the second highlight, which is Fenrisian Grey, inside of it. For smaller pipes, I'm just doing kind of a wet dry brush across it, as I don't want to paint each coil individually. So the next feature of the knight we're going to paint is the glowing green eyes. A really important feature on the knight for the viewer to focus in on. So the first thing we're going to do is block in the eye itself in white, and also the surrounding area, which we're going to use for the OSL. After this is done, I'm going to use a mixture of contrast warp lightning and also technical contrast paint of Tesseract Glow. I'm going to mix it about 90-10 to Tesseract Glow to warp lightning, and we're going to cover the eyes and the surrounding areas in this mixture. After this is dried, I'm going to mix a bit of white into this kind of greeny glow colour, and I'm going to block in around the eye. Adding even more white to the mixture, I'm just going to focus it into the centre of the eye, as this is where the glow will be brightest. And here is the finished effect. Next, we're painting some tiny little birds that are going to sit on top of the knight. So I'm using some Dark Reaper first, just to block in the feathers, as you can see. Next, I'm going to use a mixture of Fenrisian Grey and a Dark Reaper, and we're going to do our first highlight across all the feathers. Then I'm going to use some pure Fenrisian Grey and start edge highlighting the feathers themselves, using the side of the brush to get a nice, neat line. And that is one side of the wing done, and here is the finished result across the whole model. Next, I'm going to add some Silver Grey into my Fenrisian Grey to do a final edge highlight across all of the feathers and blue across the body. Next, I'm using some Rakarth Flesh, and we're going to just block in all of the skin areas and the tail. I'm going to wash this skin with just some Reikland Fleshshade that I thin down slightly with water. Next, I'm going to paint the beak and the claws and stuff with just plain old 950 Black by Vallejo. I'm going to highlight this mixture by adding some Rakarth Flesh to the black and giving it a first edge highlight. You can then use some pure Rakarth Flesh to do a second edge highlight to make it pop nicely. And then using some pure Silver Grey to highlight the skin. And then getting some Steel Legion Drab, going to mix it with black to base coat the branch the bird is on. After that's dried, I'm going to add some more Steel Legion Drab and give it a first highlight. And as you can see, here are the finished birds. A really great addition to this awesome new model. Next, I'm going to paint the skulls that are across the knight. I'm going to do the first layer with Ushabti Bone. You need a few layers of this colour to get a nice coverage. And then yeah, I'm going to just shade it with some Skeleton Horde contrast paint. I'm going to wick it away from the bits that are facing the light, i.e. the tops of the skulls, just to give it kind of cheat first highlight. And then I'm going to mix some Silver Grey with my Ushabti Bone that I already have on the palette to give it a first brush highlight. There are the finished skulls. So next we're going to work on this plasma gun glow. So first I'm going to block inside the coils with Vallejo White Grey. You need to be really neat as you're doing this, so take your time with a super fine brush, and I'm just going to carefully block in all of these gaps in the coils. And that is the finished result. It's a bit easier from this point onwards. We're going to use our Warp Lightning and our Tesseract Glow again as a mixture, and we're going to block in the white bits we just did and the coils surrounding them. Just making sure we get a nice even coverage across all the coils so there's no really inconsistency. And that is the finished result. Next, I'm going to use some pure Warp Lightning contrast. I'm going to fit a lot with water, and we're going to glaze it towards the end of the coils, as you can see, just to give it a bit more saturation. The next step is adding some of the white grey back into our original contrast green mixture, and we're going to highlight the inside of the coils. And we're just doing it at this specific spot where it's rounding, just so we keep our original colour and we just create some nice contrast with this, starting to give that glow effect some credibility. After that first highlight is done, I'm going to use some pure white grey in an even smaller area just to make it pop out. After that's done, I'm not happy with the glow just as it is, although it's perfectly fine to leave it like that. So I'm going to run some Tesseract glow really thinned out through my airbrush just to tint our highlights and give it that final result. The overspray is also going to hit the metal, the surrounding areas, and yeah, just adding to that glow effect. So we're giving it that subtle glaze, and there is the glow effect finished. The next step is painting the classic black and white Mechanicus kind of cog. So I'm just going to paint one half with 950 black, using the white grey in my palette mixed with a tiny bit of black for our first colour for the white, so we can use pure white to highlight it next. For the black highlight, I'm just mixing the white and black to make a dark grey colour to highlight with. And again, as I said, we're going to highlight the white with the pure white grey. Next, we're going to do the base of the model. So I've base coated the base in a 950 black off camera. And the first colour we're going to use to dry brush it is a mixture of Eshin Grey to black. Mostly Eshin Grey, I'd say 90% Eshin Grey, 10% black. And we're just going to use my large flat dry brush to go across the whole base and give it a nice dry brush, a nice highlight. Next, I'm using some Eshin Grey through the airbrush, as I wasn't really happy with how dark the base was looking. I wanted it a bit lighter. So this is an easy way just to build up the grey colour. And obviously I'm not aiming it towards the feet, as I don't want to cover them in the bone. Don't worry about overspray, as it will just add to the weathered look around the knight's feet. I'm adding some Dawnstone to that Eshin Grey and highlighting the base up again with the airbrush to this result, as you can see. And now I'm going to dry brush some pure Dawnstone across that. And as you can see, it's starting to look grey instead of black, which is what we want. Next, I'm adding some white grey to the Dawnstone for another layer of highlights using dry brushing. And as you can see, this is really bringing out the texture of those rocks. Next, I'm using some Winter Tuft grass tufts by the Army Painter and just putting them randomly over the base. A good kind of trick to cover up mistakes where gravel's fallen off is to put these tufts on top of them. Going to, of course, base the rim of the base in black, a perfect colour for all your models, and just really sets up the model and frames it nicely. And here is the finished knight. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial and learned a few things, and I'm really happy with the result. The new kit is absolutely outstanding, and I love painting this guy. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll be back soon with another tutorial on demand.